Today from the global lane, unrelenting ethnic cleansing. The U.S. State Department castigates China for organ harvesting, forced sterilizations, and abortions of ethnic Uyghurs.
The genocide is still ongoing. They, quote, prevented the births of 3.7 million Uyghur and other Turkic babies.
New York City's socialist candidate for mayor, Zohran Memdani, proposes rent control, free college tuition and childcare, and free bus fares.
It's absolutely crazy. All his policies are crazy. He cannot possibly believe that they're going to work.
The federal government versus the states in an AI tech tug of war. Who should protect us from the dangers?
What this breaks down to is whether we want laws created around specific harmful instances, or we want these kind of broad sweeping mandates.
And a look at past presidential meetings with Russian thugs on U.S. soil. And it's all right here on the global lane. Genocide and crimes against humanity. This time not in the Middle East, but China. The U.S. State Department, in its annual Global Human Rights Report, details Chinese Communist Party violations against predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and members of other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang province, also known as East Turkestan. Salih Hudayar is the foreign minister of the East Turkestan government in exile. Mr. Foreign Minister, it's good to talk with you again. Not so good about what's happening to your people at the hands of the Chinese government. So bring us up to date. How does this year's State Department report differ from previous years?
Well, unfortunately, the report doesn't differ much in the fact that the genocide is still ongoing and has been ongoing for the past 11 years, starting in 2014. However, the latest report does confirm that the genocide is ongoing. It includes the fact that China is continuing to mass intern Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. Many of them are now being given official, prison sentences. Millions of Uyghurs continue to be used as slave labor through Chinese corporations and factories across both East Turkestan and across China. And then it also highlights that the Chinese government is expanding its organ harvesting industry, especially targeting political prisoners and Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. And it also highlights that China is also engaging in transnational repression of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples across the globe, including here in the United States.
And it was during Trump's first term that then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo officially labeled the human rights violations against the Uyghur people as genocide. So how important was that step and the administration's determination to continue the designation? And what does that mean to the Uyghur people?
Well, it was a very important step because it was the first time that the international community, especially led by the United States, acknowledged the suffering of our people and the scale of the atrocities that our people faced. It led to similar designations by over a dozen European parliaments, Western parliaments, as well as a report by even a designation by the United Nations Human Rights Office, which stated that it was crimes against humanity. The importance of this designation is very important in, one, calling out China's atrocities, but also trying to seek accountability and justice for our people. And even after this designation, the latest development is that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security further expanded the enforcement of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which is a very positive step in the right direction. The DHS added steel, copper, lithium, and other goods presumed to be made with Uyghur forced or slave labor from coming into the United States. So this is going to be subjecting these goods that are coming from China to intense scrutiny at U.S. ports and Customs and Border Protection.
Well, I was going to say, what good is a designation unless it's backed up by action? And it looks like there's some movement in that direction. And genocide would mean the Chinese are specifically attempting to exterminate the Uyghur race. So what are they doing on that front? Forced abortion, intermarriage, what?
Yes, so the Chinese government is, according to experts on organ harvesting, they estimate that 25,000 to 50,000 Uyghur youth are being killed every year for their organs. So this is the killing part. The Chinese government also has forcibly sterilized hundreds of thousands of Uyghur women. Their own official data shows that they, quote, prevented the births of 3.7 million Uyghur and other Turkic babies over the past several decades. The Chinese government also has forcibly separated over 1 million Uyghur and other Turkic children from their families, putting them up into what they call so-called orphanages or boarding schools. But if you look at the satellite imagery data and the few images that journalists who were able to get somewhere near it were able to take, it's essentially internment camps for children. And you see Chinese social media posts in which they are brainwashing these children, dressing up these Uyghur children in, miniature People's Liberation Army uniforms, and indoctrinating them with Chinese nationalism and loyalty, and separating them from all of their, traditional, ethnic, cultural, and religious heritage.
Salih Hudayar, Foreign Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from all of the nations and given us his Torah.
Audiences are raving about Oracles of God.
I believe this is an extraordinarily well-researched movie that indeed speaks about the integrity of God's word. It's a real faith builder.
It encouraged me to realize God's hand in preserving his word throughout history.
If God is not faithful to his word, he is not faithful. But this shows that he is.
What is it?
I don't know. I thought you could tell me whether or not they're genuine.
I would describe this movie as inspiring,
captivating, excitement.
It mattered to them to get it right.
Everybody should watch this movie.
Oracles of God, the story of the Old Testament. Available now for a gift of any dollar amount.
Every grandparent should have the Superbook Bible app because it's a way for them to connect to their grandchildren. There are so many great features. The newest one that I've discovered is the Bible verse of the day. I get a notification of that. It's a place where the children want to go on that device. It's about God, his word, his promises, and it's fun. My name is Peggy. I'm a grandmother, and I love the Superbook Bible app.
Watch breaking news unfold in Israel and delve into exclusive detailed reports. You won't find it anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, because truth matters. Visit WatchCBNNews.com to find where to watch.
Zohran Mamdani, a candidate for mayor of New York City, is not only leading in the polls by double digits, but also in campaign contributions from big tech workers. According to the New York Post, Google employees have contributed the most, donating $40,000 to Mamdani's campaign. So far, he's outpaced his competition, reportedly raising about $800,000 in late June and early July. Mamdani identifies as a Shia Muslim and an admitted socialist. His critics argue that if elected, his views and policies would lead to the downfall of New York City. Well, joining us with more is former Rhodes Scholar Wanjiru Njoya, Mises Institute Scholar in residence. Wanjiru, why do you think Mamdani is leading in campaign contributions from high-tech workers, most of whom are younger millennials and Gen Zers?
That's the question everybody's asking, because when the people donating to his cause and supporting him, when they've been asked about his socialist policies and if they think it'll work, they always say no. So why are they supporting the candidate whose policies they don't identify as socialists? Why are they supporting the socialist candidate? The reason many of them are giving is that they think, you know, he's represents a more diverse New York and more, you know, this is the future of New York. This kind of nice sounding language that they're using, but it doesn't seem credible, and I don't know, it's mere speculation at this point, but people are saying that it may just be their way of finding the candidate that's going to allow them to get a foothold into basically pulling the strings, as politicians always do.
Well, let's look at the reality here in New York City, the global capital of finance and capitalism. And I know you're with Mises Institute, which is libertarian and believes in free markets and so forth. Mamdani proposes socialist ideas. Let's look at some of his proposals first. He says eliminating bus fares will lead to faster running and more efficient bus service for New Yorkers. You agree or disagree?
Oh, it's absolutely crazy. All his policies are crazy. He cannot possibly believe that they're going to work. Nobody believes that they're going to work. Some people have actually asked him, do you think this is going to work? And he doesn't answer. He just hedges. He says, well, you know what politicians are like. He just says things like, you know, New Yorkers are great and we're going to have a great city. He doesn't say that he thinks it'll work, because socialism doesn't work. All that socialists do is to redistribute wealth from one party to another. So all they do is raise money from taxes and distribute that. So when he says no bus fares, we're going to put a cap on rental, you know, all rentals will be capped by the government. He's going to run the grocery stores. He's going to fix prices. When he says all these things, he doesn't have to worry about how it's going to work, because it doesn't matter to socialists if the whole thing fails.
Well, you know, I know that you've written about this. You know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
How about this plan to provide city-run and supplied grocery stores? I got to tell you, years ago, I was in the Soviet Union and saw the stores there. The freezers were empty, but they had a full shelf of ketchup there. So tell me about the distribution and socialist ideas for grocery stores, state-run groceries.
No, the reason socialism doesn't work is that nobody who's making decisions for these state-owned grocery stores has any way of knowing what the customers want or what the customers need or what they're going to buy or what price they're prepared to pay. This is the point that Friedrich von Hayek has always tried to make. They have a massive knowledge problem. They don't know anything about the market. Mamdani doesn't know anything about the market. That's why the stores will be full of ketchup, as in the example you give.
He says he'll pay for all of this by raising taxes on millionaires, saying what AOC often says, the rich must pay their fair share. Do the wealthy pay their fair share? What would raising taxes on them mean for New York City?
It'll be exactly as we see in the UK at the moment, that has had a socialist government since, I think, towards the end of last year. And basically, the millionaires fled the country. Why wouldn't they? They don't have to stay and pay punitive taxes. So they put up the taxes. They say, squeeze the rich, I think is their slogan. They put up the taxes. The rich flee to other jurisdictions. And look at what they're saying now in the UK. They're saying put up the taxes even higher because they need more money to fund their projects. So there is no way that people, the rich, well, you saw what the rich of New York did when New York had that crazy lockdown. They just all fled to Florida. We've seen this with New York and with California and Massachusetts to a degree, and all kind of socialist-leaning states, is they start saying this needs to be federal law. That's always their next step, because otherwise everybody just flees their state, and they know this. In fact, this is why they want global taxation, because they know that people flee the state, and if they say this is now federal taxes, people flee the jurisdiction altogether. So that's why they want global taxes, global police, and basically they call it the one world, this sinister one world idea they have. That's to stop people running away from their punitive socialist policies.
Okay, today New York City, tomorrow the world. Wanjiro Njoya of the Mises Institute, thank you for joining us and sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from all of the nations and given us his Torah.
From CBN Films.
The Bible is a book that has transformed the world.
If you believe in the providence of God, you believe that God guided those who collected the oral and written traditions.
If you can't rely on its history, how can you rely on its theology?
What is it? I don't know. I thought you could tell me whether or not they're genuine.
It has been criticized, it has been banned, it has been burned, its followers have been burned and killed. It mattered to them to get it right.
From the makers of In Our Hands, Oracles of God, the story of the Old Testament. Available on instant 4K streaming access and DVD today for a gift of any dollar amount.
Because of Superbook, my parents and brother know Jesus, just like I do.
You can spread the word of God and share the love of Jesus with CBN Animation. We are seeing millions of children transformed with the gospel message, and it's making a difference. You can spread God's love to children around the world and right here at home. Call now or go to cbn.com/animation. Share God's love with children around the world today.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
High-stakes tug-of-war over artificial intelligence. Will federal standards be established, or will state regulations take precedence? The future development and use of the technology is at stake as China and the United States compete for global AI dominance. Sam Raus is the David Boaz Resident Writing Fellow at Young Voices. Sam, it's good to talk with you again. You recently wrote an article for the Center of the National Interest think tank in which you say the U.S. is at a pivotal moment and faces the choice of a nationwide technological renaissance or politicized battle between the federal government and states. Explain what's happening and why.
Yeah, so what we've seen over the past 2 years since AI really became popularly known as ChatGPT, now it's kind of phased into a number of different sectors of our daily lives on the internet, is a number of state-level regulations introduced across the country from both parties, rural to urban areas, trying to regulate this, trying to really clamp down on what are seen as some of the potential harms, some of the potential misuse of this technology. What we're getting at here is really tension between the states and the federal government in terms of how this technology is going to be regulated and how it's going to be implemented into our daily lives.
And you're right that California Governor Newsom vetoed a bill that would have required a kill switch for large AI models. Which states are considering similar legislation, and how would that affect AI innovation?
Yeah, so fortunately that bill was ultimately vetoed, but New York appears rather close to passing what is very similar legislation, which would not, try to create different statutes for criminal behavior, different rules for, how to address consumer harms, how to address property rights, but rather this kind of big, broad regulatory framework that lets the government kind of have say not at the end stake, not when something as bad has happened and say, okay, now we need to intervene and prevent damages, but rather let them preemptively determine what technologies can and can't be used, determine when AI can be applied in different circumstances. It really harms the opportunities presented by AI.
Well, recently ChatGPT has encouraged people to commit suicide and murder their bullies. Meta's chatbot is now being investigated for having sensual chats with children. Shouldn't there be a kill switch on that, federal or state regulations to prevent people and children from being harmed?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what this breaks down to is whether we want laws created around specific harmful instances, or we want these kind of broad sweeping mandates. And so I think that certainly there's a lot of interest, even by the tech companies themselves, to collaborate with lawmakers on ways to make sure that these tools aren't misused, that these tools aren't causing for, serious damage and potential loss of life to Americans. But I think the concern from the current laws that have been introduced so far is it's not really doing that. It's not really narrowing in on a lot of things that aren't new. The people have committed crimes for a long time with different technologies. They try to regulate our guns that way. They try to regulate our access to books and information that way. What these laws are really doing is just interfering with product development and the tech marketplace.
I've got to ask you to share your thoughts on China's AI efforts. There have been security and privacy concerns, of course, about DeepSeek, but China's now having persistent technical issues with AI development as it depends on Huawei chips instead of NVIDIA chips. And it seems they're suffering some setbacks as NVIDIA brings manufacturing to the U.S. They're pledging to spend about $500 billion in the next 4 years, initially in Arizona and Texas. So what difference will that make in the U.S. AI global dominance race with China?
Yeah, I certainly think we remain ahead of China first and foremost because of our free and open system. I think that not only do markets and businesses respond to our capitalist framework, letting people compete and innovate in a way that isn't top down and controlled by the government, but also by how we have a free flow of information and free speech rights in this country. AI feeds off of the information that it obtains, and it interacts with people that are using it and continues to grow. And so you can only really do that when people have the freedom to express themselves, the freedom to share different ideas with it so that it can really, think through these things and develop that knowledge. Whereas China, their internet is so highly regulated and censored and controlled, and they don't want different parts of history taught. They don't want different current events taught. And so their AI is always going to be behind us if we continue to remain a system that is open and does not try to regulate speech, does not try to regulate the content that's going into these tools.
President Trump has already signed an executive order advancing efforts for U.S. dominance on AI development and deployment, but you suggest that's not enough. What must Congress do and why?
Yeah, so under the One Big Beautiful Bill initial discussions, there was discussions of passing a federal framework in the form of a moratorium, but I think that this could be done as individual legislation, taking action on a federal law before state lawmakers create this kind of maze of regulations that these companies need to comply with in different jurisdictions, will ultimately save them a lot of time and a lot of money that can be put towards developing these tools in the way that best serves all of us and help us beat China at the end of the day.
Okay, Sam Raus, resident writing fellow at Young Voices. Nice talking with you again, Sam. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Tuesday night at 8 on the CBN News Channel.
Donald Trump has faced significant criticism for his Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Even his former national security advisor, John Bolton, suggested that the meeting should not have taken place in the USA.
I think Trump has made some mistakes already. Number one, in holding this meeting on American soil, legitimizing a pariah leader of a rogue state.
I would ask Bolton, how else do you expect the United States to help end the war in Ukraine without meeting with the main perpetrator of the violence? Others couldn't believe Trump would actually invite a war criminal, a murderous thug, to American soil. Folks, a look at some history of U.S. meetings with other Russian thugs is appropriate here. Former Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev visited the United States in September 1959. He met twice with President Eisenhower. He killed 3,000 Hungarians in the 1956 revolution and was involved in the killing of as many as 1.5 million people in Joseph Stalin's Great Terror. President Richard Nixon met on U.S. soil with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev a total of 5 times in 1973 and 1974. The main focus of those meetings was trade and nuclear arms control. Brezhnev has been criticized for his role in the deaths of more than 100,000 people in Afghanistan and for the thousands of political prisoners in Soviet gulags. Ronald Reagan also met with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev during a summit in Washington, D.C. in December 1987. I know because I was there reporting about it. They had another meeting in New York in 1988. Those discussions ultimately led to the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces INF Treaty. Gorbachev could similarly be labeled a murderous thug. He's responsible for as many as 500,000 deaths during the Soviet war in Afghanistan, as well as thousands more in Soviet Georgia, the Baltics, and Nagorno-Karabakh. So, folks, Trump is not doing anything differently as he meets with Putin to seek an end to the Ukraine war. So let's remember what Jesus said during his Sermon on the Mount, as detailed in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. By the way, Mr. President, being a peacemaker and working on peace deals will not grant you entrance into heaven. The only way to achieve that is through God's grace and faith in Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I believe him. Do you? Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.